Welcome to today's episode of Interviews, where we're thrilled to have Mrs. Harninder Bassi with us today. She's a highly accomplished business executive and board member whose career highlights her dedication to financial excellence and driving change. Mrs. Bassi currently serves as a Chief of Staff and SVP Strategy at Pindrop and has taken on roles as a CCO, CFO during her tenure. Her impressive career includes preparing companies for IPOs, managing investment relations, and leading strategic planning initiatives. She's worked with major tech companies like Cisco and various dynamic startups, making her a standout leader in financial strategy and management in the tech and startup world. Mrs. Harninder, would you like to add anything before we start?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. So the first and most important question is, if you were teenagers today in today's society, with the current knowledge you have, what would you do differently to make sure you were ahead of everyone else in your niche?
I think the teenagers today, what I would have done is, so I specialized in finance, as you know, and that was my education. I was given a lot of opportunities to actually broaden out of finance very early in my career, and I stuck to finance because that was my comfort zone. That's what I knew. Currently, I would say I'm what's known as a generalist. So I cover operations, strategy, planning, and finance. I should have probably been more exposed to, or I should have taken those opportunities a lot earlier. And what I'd actually encourage teenagers to do is not get into your comfort zone. I would challenge yourselves, and if an opportunity opens up, take it. If you see something that you want to do, grab that opportunity. I did take a lot of opportunities. I went from finance to strategy to planning and operations. I went to different countries. I went to different segments in the business. I went to different verticals in the business. But I think I could have just done more, because as a generalist, it really helps me to understand the holistic parts of the business, saying how does the enterprise business work to how does a small and medium-sized business work? How does business happen internationally? In Europe is very different to Asia, to very, in the US, and even within the US, different states have different laws. So having all that exposure and absorbing that, and for me, really, it's driven from curiosity, learning. I'm always looking to learn something new. Every job kind of gets to a stage where you're like, okay, now I can start doing it in my sleep. So always be curious. There's so much to learn. And even if you stay in one particular field, the world around us changing fast. So there's always something even new in that. So what I'd really encourage individuals to do is take opportunities, don't get stuck in your comfort zone, and really just be curious, wanting to learn about everything and anything, because you'll be surprised how it all interconnects.
Okay, that's really good. And I was wondering, do you really recommend teenagers to go to other states and other countries to learn more about what they do, or just try to specialize in where they are for now?
It really depends on what they're looking for. For me, having that variety of different, like I worked in UK, I was born and bred in the UK. I did a stint in Netherlands, then I moved to the US. I would love to have the opportunity to live and work in Asia. I've done global roles that have given me some experience of Asia, but living and working in there is very different, right? So you really get to immerse the culture and the way business works. I personally think, for me, it's something that people should do, because you learn the world is more and more connected, right? With social media, technology. Like years ago, you could live just in the US and not really be impacted by other countries. Now the world is getting smaller to some extent from that perspective. So what's happening in Europe directly impacts US businesses. What's happening in Asia directly impacts US businesses, and vice versa. And you'll see it in the geopolitical, you'll see it in economics. So if you can get the opportunity, 100% take that opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And then looking back at your early years, what are some strategies that help you stand out?
So I think if I look at early on, so there was a time when I used to try to fit in, right? So, and being in high tech and in finance, I was the only female in a lot of rooms, youngest by far. I was brown, so there was a lot of things different, and I tried to fit in. I would wear suits with big shoulder pads and all of that stuff, right? Tried to sound like the men and everything. And then it got to a stage where I kind of realized, actually, I'm not going to ever sound like them or look like them or, be like them. And it was actually my mother. So I did an internship with Cisco, and they gave me an expat opportunity to Netherlands. And the team in the UK were preparing me like, you're going to be very different. People may not accept you early on. Are you ready for this? And I was young and naive, and I was like, yes, I'm ready for this. I can do this. Like, don't worry, I've got it. I went there. I think 3 weeks in, I was like in tears, because I was like, shit, nobody's listening to me. Nobody even wants me here. And all the sacrifices, all the hard work my family did for me, I've done for me, it wasn't worth it, right? Because I kind of felt like I hit a brick wall. And I called my mum in tears, and my mum was never one of those sympathetic. She was always pushing. She's like, well, why would they pay you to send you there? They could find anybody else. They sent you because you're different. And that's what made me realize. She goes, what, don't try to shy away from your differences. Use that difference, because that's why they sent you. And that's when I kind of created this unique competitive differentiation for myself. And I was like, actually, yes, if I was the same as everybody else, they didn't need to send me from the UK to Netherlands. They could just find somebody here. Yeah. And I kind of then became more confident in myself and who I was, and used that differentiation. And with that, as week 6, 7, whatever it was, people started listening and incorporating my ideas, and that felt great. Yeah. So just being yourself, not losing yourself, and now sometimes you have to adapt, but knowing who you are, what your core skills are, and what drives you, what energizes you. Not everything energizes everybody, right? Some people get energized by deep thinking, deep research projects. Some people get energized by talking to people. Some people can't stand wanting to talk to people, right? So knowing what you enjoy, what you're good at, and then thinking, what competitive differentiation does that provide for you? Okay. Right? So for me, I've done finance operations strategies. My competitive differentiation is I can drive financially responsible, operationally feasible, strategically relevant, holistic strategies. Mm-hmm. If you need somebody that's purely deep in finance, that's not my competitive differentiation, right? So that's somebody else. So knowing what you bring to the table over and above everybody else. And some tables you won't bring that, right? So you've got to know where you can bring that and where you can't bring that. And obviously you go to the tables that you can provide that.
So the key word really here for teenagers is competitive differentiation, and then finding yourself, just pursuing it.
Yeah. Just like a product, when you're putting a product out there, you're looking at what's your unique competitive, your product. Mm-hmm. You are the product. So you're putting your competitive differentiation out there. What's unique to you?
Investor relations and fundraising are sophisticated areas. How can teens start building these skills early, perhaps through school projects or other particular experiences?
So this one's a hard one, because markets are constantly changing, right? So when I started getting into this kind of arena, it was all about growth at any cost. Mm-hmm. So companies were getting multiples, 30 multiples just on driving growth, and they had no path to profitability. Recent years, it's all about profitable growth, right? So your growth could be slightly less, but if you have a path to profitability, you're going to get a good multiple. So to me, it's what teenagers can do now is read. Look at, maybe buy stock in a particular company, right? Follow that company. Look at what is it, that metrics that matter. How are people valuing companies? Because it constantly changes, right? When the SaaS revolution happened, what's happening there? So what are the key metrics? And I'm constantly learning. So I grew up in the hardware world, where the metrics were completely different. How markets were valued were completely different to the SaaS environment. And I was like, okay, what is NRR? What is CAC? All of this. So, I had to learn all of that stuff. The good thing is a lot of stuff you can learn just from Googling, but talking to people in the industry. So being relevant always. So it's continuous education, looking at the markets, listening to podcasts, talking to people like friends, families, parents, they're all in this economy that's driving the evaluations. Now, the other thing is markets aren't always rational, right? So there's an element of, that's why you have to read, okay, what's happening? The war is impacting businesses. So there's an element of reading the financials and understanding what the metrics that really are key, and how do you then drive those key metrics And also you got to know your North Star. If you want to become a public, long, sustainable company, it's very different to if you want to do a short-term exit, right?
Yeah.
So looking at how do you markets value that, what metrics matter, and then how can I get that intel? And good way is, like I said, buy stock, even if it's just a little bit of stock in one company, follow that market valuation, and then understand, okay, it took a dip. Why do you think it took a dip? Read analyst reports on it. And it went, boom, why did it, NVIDIA, why is it going up now? Because of the chip, AI is driving it, So just reading, talking to people, looking at what the stock market's doing. And like I said, don't always think it's rational. Sometimes it is very irrational.
That stock advice is really good. And then, during your high school years, what activities or courses do you think were the most valuable, and what would you recommend high schoolers now to do?
High schoolers have a lot like that expectations on them, I will say, and US education system is very different to the UK system.
Yeah.
So my advice in the US would be, one, look at, try not to tick all the boxes, right? Because I think there's so many boxes, but really looking at what you enjoy, because that's what you're going to be successful at. And by the way, when I say enjoy, I'm not one of these that what makes you happy, because you have to sustain your lifestyle, right? So looking at, if you think AP history is good for college, but you cannot stand writing essays or reading or looking, probably not going to be good in that. If maths is where you're excelling at, go into math, So really picking the courses you want, but then also building out skills through like communication. You can be a great ideas person, you could have great points of view, but if you can't communicate them, that's not going to go well, right? Yeah. So somebody else that may not be as great on ideas, but they can communicate them, they can get people behind them and align people, they're going to do better. Yeah. So it's the hard skills of what subjects you pick. To me, business, finance is what I did because that's what I was good at, that's what I enjoyed. I also am constantly building up my communication skills because you can't do anything without communicating. And communication is not something you build one time. You're constantly evolving. Years ago, I got feedback that I was too direct. So my drive to be efficient and productive, I would be very direct. And not everybody likes that. So then it was like, okay, how do I tone down my communication? Then it became, okay, so now I'm a leader. How do I inspire people, motivate people? Then we hit COVID. How does communication change over Zoom? So you're constantly evolving those skills that you have. And honestly, I mean, even now, there's so many things that I'm constantly changing, whether it's hard skills. Like I said, I was learning the SaaS environment. That was hard skills, like, okay, what metrics matter? How are they driven? Or there's so many nuances. How should we calculate ours? Then how do we, communicate this out to the company? So there's so many things that we need to continually change. And I think for high schoolers right now, the most important is knowing what you're good at, what you get lost in, that you forget what time it is, right? Those kind of subjects, pick those. So to me, it's going back to picking the right, like open to experiences, communication, how you collaborate with people. So right now, I don't think there's any project that I work on that is just me siloed, right? Being able to work with others, and quite frankly, working with people that you may not enjoy working with or may have a very different style of working as well. So how do you connect with those individuals, get individuals to align to your way of thought, or be open-minded and change your thoughts? So being open-minded, curious, building those skills. And I think there's lots of projects you can do, like even school sports, right? There's people, like you play soccer, right? You could be frustrated because somebody didn't take that corner kick the way it is, but that's life. That's right. That happens in the work environment. Somebody may not be pulling their weight, or somebody may not show up for practice, but then expect to play the game. Somebody doesn't do their part of the project at work. So having those skills of teamwork, collaboration, communication, those are really fundamental. And then, just trust and integrity.
Okay, perfect. And then you've led companies through major changes and growth phases. What key attitudes or skills do you think teens should develop early on to get through this? I know you mentioned how you need to get used to other people, but how could they really implement these?
So I think change, a lot of people fear change because they kind of get stuck into their comfort zone. It's easy. They know the people, they know the processes, they know the tools. But change, if you look at it, is actually the most exciting thing out there, because I can't imagine, like, because you're going to be working, 40, 50 years of your life. If it was the same every day, like, it would bore me to death, right? Yeah. So when I see change, I get super excited because I'm like, oh, what's this going to, what can I learn? Who am I going to talk to? So sometimes it's learning, like I said, metrics. Sometimes it's just exposure to new people and you learn stuff from new people. Sometimes exposure to maybe a new environment. It's, could it be that they want me to lead APAC, or could it be that, new vertical? So you learn about different things. So if you approach change as an exciting opportunity to learn from, I think that's one key way of going into it, rather than fearing change. Like AI is an example. There's a lot of people like, oh my God, AI is going to change everything and it's going to take my job. How do I protect my job? To me, I'm like, oh, AI is going to change our jobs, but let me see how can I help it, like, make me better, right? So AI is not something that's new, but it's something that has exponentially become more accessible to people now. So I'm looking at it as an exciting way of, okay, maybe some of my routine job I can get to AI and actually get to the more exciting stuff. How do I add more value? So continuously looking at it with an open mind, a growth mindset, as I think that's more the terminology now, but really being open to it. And then it's also getting people aligned around whatever change it is. And the way you do that is really, one, highlighting the why. Why are we doing this? Because if you're asking people in different departments to do something which they're kind of like, why am I doing this? If you highlight the why. So at our company, we went to becoming a cloud company. We shared with them the why we were doing this, right? Why the market's going there. It's more cost beneficial. And that's where we're going to put all our effort. When people understand the why, they will want to do it themselves rather than you kind of trying to drag them along or pull them along. They like, oh my God, like, yeah, I see the vision and I can see why we would need to get there. So I'm going to, and they bring ideas to you, because you're not going to have all the ideas. But if you don't share the whole context and the background of why we're doing it, it's harder for them to bring the ideas, because they're just like, if you're just telling them what to do. So creating that why, and then bringing them into the decision. Like, guys, this is what we're thinking. What do you think? Are we going around the path? What other ways can we do this? What areas can you impact here? So kind of bringing them into the decisions, and also how they can impact. And then what blockers do you see? Because we don't always see it. And then it's like actually acknowledging it, not just getting the feedback, getting that feedback, and then acknowledge, say, okay, these areas of challenge we're going to address. These are outside of our control, maybe, but we still address them in the sense that we've acknowledged them, but we say, look, for X, Y, and Z reasons, we're not going to deal with it right now, but this is what we're going to focus on. So really kind of getting people aligned and then bought in, and then continuously giving them the progress. Because sometimes when you're, especially in change management, nothing goes smoothly, right? There's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There's going to be course corrections. So continuously giving them progress updates. This is where we've done good. This is where we haven't done good. Some of it was our own fault. Some of it was outside of our control. So how are we going to course correct? So continuously keeping the team aligned and, communicating where we are and how we're doing and how we're going to continue.
That's perfect. Mentorship has often been highlighted as a game changer. How would you advise teens to seek out and learn from mentors, and what should they do to gain from those relationships?
Mentorship is key, and I think there's mentorship, sponsorship, and you often hear people say network. I actually don't like the terms per se, and the reason I don't is it almost sounds like it's a transactional, like you're trying to get something, right? So to me, one of my favorite quotes and I live by is the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. So all of this comes, excuse me, under relationships. You're building a relationship, and I've had formal mentors and I've had informal. Anybody can teach you anything, something, right? So I'll seek out, like, you know, when I was at Cisco or Rubrik or Pindrop, I'll seek out people like, oh, I really love the way they present. Let me talk to them about that, right? Or God, that individual had some great insights into this particular thing that I'm really interested in. So then I'll seek out that individual. So one, it's knowing what you need, whether it's guidance, you know, insight into a particular topic, whether it's introduction, you know, whatever it is, and then seeking out the right individual and, you know, kind of going in prepared, right? So sometimes people come to get mentoring from me and they'll walk in and I'm like, okay, so what is it that you're looking for? I just want to get promoted. That's not really a, you know, mentorship. It's like, okay, I want to learn this skill, right? And then I can say, actually, I can help you with that. Or maybe I'm not the right person for that because I'm still working on that myself. But let me introduce you to somebody that I think is great at it that will be willing to take this on. So one, knowing what you want out of the relationship. Two, seeking out the right individuals for that. And you can seek them out anywhere. It can be family, friends, teachers. It can be your sports coaches. It can even be your peers, right? You could see a friend that, you know, is really good at the way he gets people together on a project. You're like, you know, I struggle with that. How do you do that? And sometimes they don't even know it's a skill in them because it maybe comes natural to them, right? And it's always a compliment. So I used to fear asking people to help me. And somebody once told me, it's like, well, if you're asking me for my help, I'm assuming you think I'm good at it. So it's a compliment. So I love it when people ask me. So I'm like, oh, actually, I never thought of it that way. So now I'm more open to asking people and also showing vulnerability, saying, you know, I really am not familiar with this topic, or I'm not good at this skill I'm building out. Would you mind helping me? So being vulnerable yourself, but all around you, you know, you can find mentorship. And like I said, I wouldn't treat it as so formal or anything. It just, I want to learn about this. Are you willing to help me? You know, I think you're great at this. And I've seen you doing it in project X, Y, and Z, or Mr., you know, whatever teacher you have. You know, I love the way you can inspire the class around this. I'm looking to do that on my idea. How do you do, you know? So I would just not fear it as a kind of big formal thing. Just treat it as relationships and look around you.
So look at mentorship not as like one person, oh, I have to listen to them. You can literally look at anyone and be like, oh, if they're better than this, I can just ask them.
Yeah, and the reason I've looked at it that way is no one person is great at everything.
Yeah.
Right. So I see people that are great communicators. I see people that are great executors, great strategists, great, you know, idea builders. So I kind of seek out, okay, what am I looking for this year? Right. Whatever that skill is. And I think, who do I know that's got? And then I'll talk to that individual. Or it might be, okay, I really need to learn about, like when I was doing the SaaS, okay, I need to go and talk to some SaaS experts. So it's really looking at the skill you want and then the person that has it.
The industry is constantly evolving. What trends do you see on the horizon that teens interested in tech, finance, or strategy should keep an eye on?
So the big one is obviously AI, right? So I don't think you can read anything or see anything in the news without AI. So, but there's a lot more. So to me, AI isn't new. It's been going on for decades, right? It's just become cheaper, more accessible, easier to use. And that's what's driven in them with the chat GPT of OpenAI. That's what's driven more attention to it. So it's just become more powerful. Learning how to use it, and then what do you bring above it, right? Because jobs will change, right? But like I said earlier, don't fear that change. Think about, okay, how will jobs change? And then go to what the change is going to be. So if I look at my job, right, there's parts of it that can totally, you know, automate now with even more powerful. And I've always been automating my jobs, right? Everybody's been automating, just now it's more powerful. So there's elements that I can, you know, get email writing and all of that but then where do I add additional value? So looking at thinking, okay, this is an AI trend. How do I use it? And then what additional value do I provide above that AI? So really looking at all the tools available to you. And I don't know about your school, but I can, like, my daughter's school is really leaned into ChatGPT. They use it. They show the kids how to use it. My son's is not as much. So they're kind of like, no, you shouldn't use that.
Yeah.
But my view is like, that's the world they're going to go out into. So you need to know how to use it responsibly, but also in the right way, understanding its biases, understanding it hallucinates. So you can't just take what ChatGPT puts out.
Yeah.
You have to actually take, okay, does this make sense? Does this, what was I thinking? So looking at the AI technology, that's one part, but there's lots of other areas that healthcare is ripe for innovation. If I look at environment, there's so much innovation there. So again, it kind of goes to, even within tech, if I think about, early on, it was the internet revolution. Every company was going to be a tech company. Then it was the cyber risks, right? So every company wanted to be a security company. Now it's AI.
Yeah.
But within that big tech, there's lots of little niches, right? Whether you want to go into environment, whether you want to go to healthcare, whether you want to go to specific healthcare. So looking at what still drives you, what you're passionate about within the tech environment, and then how do you use what's currently available, and then what's your value add over it? Because if you just resist AI, there'll be a lot of people that are going to use it and surpass you, right? So you become irrelevant. So you always want to stay relevant, but then what's your, again, unique competitive differentiation over and above the technology? Like, why would somebody hire you that they could get AI to do?
Okay, that's perfect. And then finally, what daily habits or personal disciplines have you found the most critical for success?
So I'm a big believer in, and I've done a few courses of the 7 Habits by Stephen Covey of Highly Effective People. And there's actually a teen book, so if teenagers want to read it. And the way I've incorporated it is, I started doing it 20 plus years ago, but I would pick one skill at a time to incorporate into my life. I used to be one of these that, think, oh, there's so many areas I need to focus on and everything's going to be done in 1 year. I soon realized it's hard to just completely change yourself, right? So I now, each year, I start with one thing, and to this day, one thing that I'm going to change, all right? Now, sometimes it could be, I want to learn about a particular topic. Sometimes it's, I want to become more compassionate, right? So whatever it is, that one thing I'm going to change. What the 7 Habits taught me was really getting that focus and then being more organized. The kind of jobs that I do, and because I like to be busy, I have to be organized, right?
Yeah.
I did, like, end of the night, I'm looking at, okay, what's on my to-do list tomorrow? What do I really need to do? What can slip because things will happen tomorrow that I don't know today, that takes my time. So these, like, I have to do. On a Sunday night, I'm prepping my week. Each day, I'm prepping what it's the next day. So I think for what teenagers, because, like I said, you have your academics, you have extracurricular, you have sports, and you have homework, and then, everything else. Yeah. Really being organized and knowing what it is that is the big focus. So I call it kind of the North Star. Each year, I'm like, okay, what's my North Star that I want to get to? And then you have the little skills or the knowledge or anything else that I need to build to get to that North Star, and I kind of chunk it up, and so it becomes a bit more realistic and achievable. So this year for me was, I actually wanted to get fitter, right? And kind of boring, but I was like, okay, my goal is going to be at least to hit the gym 3 times a week. That made it more easy for me, rather than saying I'm going to do it 5 days a week or 7 days a week, right? And then I'm going to eat like this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm, so I was like 3 days a week. Now I've been hitting it 4 or 5 days a week at least. Naturally, I've got to now, next step is like, okay, eating healthier, doing this. So going back to one chunk at a time, preparing, and just not trying to conquer like the world peace in one go, right? It's really that focus and then that discipline. So keeping that, like for me, the discipline is, like I said, annually, monthly, weekly, daily, I plan my day.
Yeah.
And I have to plan that because, my work, my kids, travel, everything. So I know what's happening so that I can deal with the fire drills that happen. Then I know, okay, this can drop out. I can fit this in. This is how I'm going to do this. So really just organization, focus, and preparation, because without preparation, I think leaving life to chance is not the best way. And then the other thing I would say is kind of going that extra mile for kids. I have a young kid at work. I call him young because I'm older now. And if I need something, or if I'm coming into the office and, he'll be like, what time are you coming in? And I'll say 8. He'll be like, I'll be there at 7:45. So always going that above and beyond, right? If I ask him for anything, he'll always do that little bit extra. And that's what makes you stand out. So as a teenager, really thinking, this is what I need to do. Let me just do that little bit extra. I see a lot of times people do just what's required. But there's a lot of people that do just what's required. So if you want to stand out, that little bit extra.
And so based off your advice, what teenagers could really do today is go home, make a list of 10 things you want to do, and then split them up into what's needed now, what I could do, and what I can let slide, and then they can focus on one by one at a time. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming today. So many teenagers are going to benefit off your advice. And if you ever need anything, let me know.
Thank you.